Chapter 22. Political Favor. While he was here on Terra, Justinian decided to offer some assistance. He was still in the air, so he started to fly down to land because he would rather not be surrounded by the Leaguers. However, he could always go to Balance Breaker because, unlike Clarion, who could not die, they could. They didn't seem to mind because he had come to help Terra, so he called his honor guard to his side when he landed. Rimnosh and the other 39 elites flew toward his location before moving to flank him without delay. Once they were back at his side, they felt far more confident in their ability to protect him if need be. Even though they knew their lord and master needed no protection, it was better to be safe than sorry. Once at his side, Rimnosh looked around the devastated capital. She reached up and removed her helmet before holding it under her arm. This was quite devastating if I had to say so. Reminds me of the rubric. Justinian nodded as he grew back to his proper height of 12 feet. That it was, from what the League has said, they will begin to treat the city like Cornabil. Any tainted buildings will be disposed of by fate in other dimensions. Corpses will be burned in purifying fires, and even affected soil will be dug up to be disposed of. People will die in the following days because of chaos-related curses, so it was worse than expected. From what they told me holding Clarion off resulted in the damage being reduced. Laurelina, who was near Rimnosh, smiled. This would be a good time to start my sermons and speak the holy word. You did help them, so they must see this as it was an act of the divine. She held her hands in prayer, forming a Draconica, Aquila, with them. The rest of Justinian's honor guard began to move away from her, as she seemed kind of crazy. Justinian, though, liked her as she was, without a shadow of a doubt, loyal. He would not discard her faith or burn her city as her namesake had faced. If you want to do that, you have my permission. Which reminds me, Helbrecht take a portal to Mars and brings back a chapter of Marines. Bring my Predacons as well. We will do some aid. While that happens, she can do her sermons. That way, no one will get the smart idea to attack one of my honor guard. Helbrecht placed his fist on his chest and bowed. At once, my king. Helbrecht flew off toward the Imperial Embassy. He would take the portal still inside, and through it, they would transport the entire chapter. While he did that, it seemed some of the Leaguers were starting to gather around him once more. Superman walked over, which caused Justinian's elites to all lock on him. They held their glaives, swords, and spears tighter, fully prepared to attack if needed. The other Leaguers noticed this, as they were not subtle, which caused them to, so he gave the order to relax. Hold. Taking the message, they all relaxed, which Superman took notice of. Guess they're not big fans of me. Each of the elites shook their heads, which stung. Diana was curious why the Martians saw Superman negatively. What makes him different from me? Sigismund gave his answer behind his hound-shaped helmet. He is a Kryptonian and a powerful foe. As the honor guard of our Lord and Master, we must take note of every threat to his life. He may not see you as a threat, but we do. Justinian nodded. Thank you, Sigismund. Don't take it to heart, Kal-El. I don't see you as a threat. Superman squinted his eyes as that sounded ominous. Much of what Justinian said could be taken as a threat. I don't want anyone to see me as a threat, so I am glad. Now I could overhear your talk earlier. And what is this about a chapter of Marines coming? Justinian did not answer as Helbrecht moved fast. When he arrived on Mars, he used Psychic Net to place the order. A chapter of Space Marines moved to the portal built in Cadia City, and the Shapers activated it. Once the large portal was opened, the 1,000 Marines and the 5 Predacons moved through it. When they crossed the portal, they did so in a giant space, as the embassy was not how it seemed. It was a small building on the outside, but inside, it had a massive space expansion spell placed on it. The 1,000 Martian Space Marines and Justinian's Predacons all managed to fit in space. Once they had all crossed onto Earth in the embassy, the chapter master ordered them to phase out of the building to move out of the embassy. Justinian's pets started to phase through the walls, which the Leaguers could see. Justinian's embassy was one of the unaffected buildings. Seeing Predaking, Grindel, Devastator, Grimlock, and Rampage, who had all been growing. Now, The 5 former bioships were 120 feet long and flew into the sky to get to Justinian's side. Behind them, the 1,000 Space Marines in full power armor flew after them. Just like the Predacons, they flew to join Justinian, meaning the odds were much more fair now. He had 1,000 well-armed, powerful white Martians as well. Martians were one of the few species that could harm Kryptonians like Superman, and seeing the giant force that Justinian had brought worried him. The Predacons alone were hissing and growling at him and the other Leaguers. The Space Marines were standing in rank and file, waiting for the order if needed. Diana looked up at Justinian before he raised his right fist in the air. Split up and look for survivors among the collapsed buildings. Administer aid to those who can receive it, using healing magic if you know them. At his word, the Marines split into 10 companies, each led by their captains. As for the Predators, they joined 5 of the companies to aid in moving collapsed buildings and sniffing out people. Superman relaxed as Justinian began to walk forward until he was in front of Superman. He looked down at the Kryptonian, who observed that Justinian's Marines were already pulling survivors out of the buildings. I get that you consider me a threat, but just know I will do what I can for Terra. Batman, who was nearby, asked the question he had. You say Terra, what about the people on it? That is more complicated. I will admit that there are people who need to die. Criminals, for one, child predators, rapists, serial killers, and others. But I know that you believe that all people deserve to be redeemed. Let us not lie to ourselves that some monsters in human skin deserve to be put down. Batman clenched his fist. And you get to pick? Yes, I do. But Terra is not mine to rule. So I will respect its choices unless those choices begin to lead it on a path of self-destruction. If need be, I will intervene to ensure humanity survives. Until then, I expect the Justice League to keep it safe. Until then, I will remain on Mars. Justinian placed his arms behind his back as he walked past the League with his honor guard. As he walked past Batman, he turned to him psychically. Contingency plan, Custodes. Password, 91939. That was all he said before cutting the link. Bruce's eyes widened as no one was supposed to know about his contingency plans or password. But Justinian had long since downloaded all of them after he had hacked the Batcave. Martian Manhunter, linked to all the Leaguers, heard Justinian's words. He squinted his eyes before turning to Batman. Contingency plans? Batman began to protect his thoughts, as he didn't want to explain this to everyone. It is for our potential enemies, John, nothing more. If you say so, Batman. When he cut the link, Diana looked at Bruce before she flew into the air before flying over. She flew over his honor guard, but since Justinian allowed it, they did not intervene. She flew near him as she wanted to talk to him. I just wanted to say thank you. Themyscira also has an embassy here in D.C., and, just like yours, it is also a portal to get to my island. Some of my sisters were stationed there, and you might have saved their lives. He looked up at her and nodded. It was no trouble at all, Diana. While I have you here, I wanted to inform you about something if you know about it. Do you know you have a twin brother? Diana froze at the information as she had never learned of that. Are you certain? Justinian nodded. His name is Jason. Your mother gave him up to Glaucus, one of the Argonauts. As you know, men cannot go to Paradise Island, which is why the Amazons give their male children to Hephaestus, so as not to kill them. Diana looked down at the knowledge. I see. It seems I will need to contact my mother to get the answers. I will search for him. Thank you for telling me. Justinian nodded. Of course, you my friend. Are you not? Diana smiled and patted him on the shoulder. That I am. Now, I will help your warriors in the rescue. She flew off to help them move the buildings to get to the survivors. Meanwhile, Justinian turned to Laurelina. You can go start your sermons if you want. She bowed with a grin. Of course. She exited the formation to start finding people and speaking the holy word. Meanwhile, Justinian and his remaining honor guard reached the White House. The portal was still up, but Justinian opened a hole with his thoughts. He and his guards walked through with Justinian, who allowed the portal to close behind him. As they walked forward, the front door opened, and some of the Secret Service walked out. They walked forward before one of them stood before Justinian. Sir Dash, Remnosh corrected the man. Your Majesty is not just a sir. He is a king. You will address our king with his proper title. The man corrected himself because he would not argue with a bunch of white Martian elites who could melt his mind with a thought. My apologies, Your Majesty. Are you here to see the president? We were about to prepare to move him out of the city until the side effect from the battle were dealt with. We are thankful for your aid in our time of need. I am. I wish to speak to Buren because my embassy was almost destroyed. 2 of my Marines were nearly killed in the U.S. Capitol. How did this happen? The Secret Service agent cleared his voice. We can admit to being underprepared for a Lord of Chaos attack, but the League would have stopped in soon enough. It was just that Clarion's magic messed with their teleportation. We do thank you for preventing further destruction, Your Majesty. Justinian shook his head. I will see the president now. Remnosh, Titus, Dorn, Logan, Cato, you will come with me. The rest of you stand at attention and always keep communication up. Yes, my king. Justinian and his 5 chosen elites all phased through the White House wall rather than shrink. Once inside, they were led to the president's office, where he was preparing to evacuate. When he saw Justinian and his elites, he swallowed his nerves. Justinian, I could see your battle. You saved my life and that of the people of the city. Justinian squinted his eyes. We need to talk about this event. Moving across planets is bothersome, and I had to intervene to prevent the deaths of my soldiers. Buren sat down as he expected that other countries with their embassies in D.C. would also demand an explanation. Let us discuss what you have in mind. Let's. Justinian conjured a chair for himself, as he would use this chance to get quite a bit of compensation for having to save the city. He could profit here and maybe get a favor from America. Chapter 23, Legendary Prize. Once Justinian sat down with the president, he reached up and removed his helmet, revealing his slitted golden eyes. He placed the large helmet on his lap as he looked down at the old president. You see, Buren, I know that even you couldn't prepare for a Lord of Chaos attack. However, that is no excuse. My troops are all white Martians, elites when compared to standard humans. Each one is worth 10,000 human lives, because most humans aren't very useful individually. Buren clasped his hands together because Justinian's aura was stronger than when they met. Looking up into Justinian's eyes for a moment, he could swear he saw Draig and Albion manifest behind Justinian. The 2 heavenly dragons snarled at him, causing him to shake in terror. Justinian slapped his hand on his armored knee, snapping Buren from his terror. My goal is to ensure the human species' survival, but that doesn't mean I care what happens to each individual. However, my Martians are different. Even the weakest ones are elites compared to human troops. As such, I think it is time we talk about compensation. I came from Mars to save you and your capital. I brought over a chapter of my Marines to help clean up, and my pets are here. And I didn't do it for free. Buren gulped. What do you want? Justinian leaned forward and used his psychic ability to take control of Buren's mind. Tell me, does the United States still have the Spear of Destiny? Buren nodded with a blank look on his face. Yes, it is underground, even deeper than the bunker. Several defenses protect it, and only the president can access it. Hearing that made Justinian grin wider than he had ever done. He could defend himself from the Spectre and other angels with the Spear of Destiny. Good, we're going to take a little trip. Titus, Cato, Logan, and Dorn return to my honor guard and return to Mars. Wait for me in my Labramnosh, and I will be retrieving the Spear of Destiny. By your will. The 4 elites bowed before they left the White House. On their way out, they used their psychic powers to ensure the Secret Service didn't call the alarm or anything like that. When they exited the White House, Justinian turned to Buren. Take me down. Buren stood up and walked toward a bookshelf in his office. He pulled a book out, revealing a hidden elevator. He stepped inside and waited for Justinian and Remnosh. He turned to her with a smirk on his face. Shrink down a little, 6 feet will be good. She followed his instructions, and they shrunk to that height together. They stepped into the elevator with Buren, who pushed a combination of buttons to start the secret descent. As the elevator went down, Remnosh looked next to him. I hope this is worth it. I hate being this small. He felt the same, as he was so used to being huge that being small was uncomfortable. I know, I hate it too. I will explain in simple terms. The spear of destiny was the spear a Roman soldier used to pierce the side of Jesus. Remnash squinted her eyes. Who is Jesus? He chuckled and placed a hand on her head. You're cute when you act like that. Jesus is the Son of God, the creator of the universe. The spear of destiny was granted its power by piercing his side. I want it because it can fight against angels, some of the most powerful beings. It comes at a cost, though, because the spear is cursed. As such, I won't be messing with it for a long time. Remnash was now curious. How powerful are these angels? Stronger than I can describe. They didn't talk anymore as the elevator stopped deep underground. Justinian knew the bunker above them was lead-lined, so even Superman couldn't see down there. Buren began to walk forward with a blank look on his face. Here, guards were patrolling, and when they saw Justinian and Remnash, they raised their weapons, but Justinian released a wave of magic and psychic energy. All of them fell to the ground unconscious. Move and hurry up. Justinian opened his hand and summoned his guardian spear. As Buren continued to lead him down, Remnash and Justinian dealt with all the opposition. With his technomancy, he erased any footage of him being down here. He also turned off all turrets, doors, and laser defenses. It took over an hour, but eventually Buren led them to the lowest floor where the spear was kept. Even behind the reinforced door to the safe, Justinian could feel the spear's power. He knocked out Buren and teleported him back to his office. Then, he aimed his guardian spear forward and used geomancy to control the metal in the door. He pushed the metal aside to open up a giant hole in the blast door, removing the last barrier to one of the strongest artifacts in DC. The fact that America didn't have mages studying this was a damn shame for them, but a boon for him. He and Remnash walked into the safe, and in the middle of the room was a hermetically sealed glass case. Inside the glass case was his prize, the Spear of Destiny. Remnash stared at it in awe as the silver spear had glowing runes across its body. That is the spear? Justinian nodded. Yes. He walked forward as the spear was not protected with magic or anything. Anyone, even Hitler, who used it during WW2, could use it. Though the Nazi leader had cursed it, even then, the weapon was going to be of great importance to Justinian's future. He pointed his hand forward, and with telekinesis, he caused the glass case to float. Using magic, he conjured an imitation and closed the hole in the blast door. I got what I wanted. Let's go. He teleported with Remnash and the spear back to Mars inside his laboratory. As he had ordered, his honor guard was already there, and when they saw that he and Remnash were back, they were overjoyed. The only one not here was Laurelina, who was currently well protected. He would help for a day only and then pull his troops back to Mars, leaving the rest of the cleanup to the League. The first thing he did was return his true height because he was much happier when he was his gigantic size. Remnash did the same, as neither of them liked being small. Once they were back to normal, he set down the glass case before turning to his guards. I acquired my prize, and I can safely say it will be our key to the future. For now, I must build a place to store this safely. Only you, my honor guard, are to know of this thing. Make sure you tell no one. His guards accepted the order and wouldn't dream of telling anyone. Justinian decided to toss the spear into the dimensional pocket he created, where he stored. This way, the spear couldn't be stolen because he didn't want to lose it. This was his answer to the angels if they ever came to fight him, and maybe even Darkseid if he managed to fuse his guardian spear with the Spear of Destiny. He had another ingredient for reforging his guardian spear, the God Killer Sword. When he upgraded his armor, he wanted to get the Annihilator, another creation of Hephaestus. That would increase his ability to fight divine beings more than his current skills. Then, the Helmet of Ares. Those new abilities would help him in his future conquests, especially if he got access to some 10th metal. With his plans in motion, he decided to start one of his plans. Remnash, when Laurenia, the chapter, and my Predacons return from Earth tomorrow, I want you to raid a blood bank on Earth. Take all of the blood and bring it to Mars. What do you plan to do with it? He smiled as he began to leave his lab to get to his crystal throne. I'm going to start my cloning experiment. I need workers, so I will create a force of clones to increase the number of workers. If my plan works, they should form souls I can harvest. Some rituals, I want to cast cost souls, and if I can farm weak clone souls, I could do it more humanely without having to slaughter a bunch of people. These clones will be for labor, but I already have in mind an individual to use as a template for a proper clone army. Slade Wilson, also known as Deathstroke. He is a super soldier, and clones formed from his DNA can be used in war better than regular humans. Which reminds me, what did you do with all the white Martian corpses? Remnosh knew the answer to that. We mass buried them on the surface in deep graves. You want their bones? Justinian nodded. Yes. One of you, take a force of Martians and dig up as many of these graves as you can. Even if all that remains is teeth, I need green Martian DNA. I must have access to it. Helbrecht nodded. I can do that right now, my king. In that case, get on it now. Yes. The Martian elite ran ahead of them to complete this Justinian order. As he ran ahead, Justinian had already left his lab and ascended the interior of the pyramid. When he and his honor guard reached his throne, Justinian took his seat surrounded by his honor guard. Remnosh, as usual, sat on his lap, which was her favorite place to sit. It made her feel closer to him, and he also enjoyed it, even when she was in power armor. Once she was seated, he wrapped his arm around her and leaned back on his throne. Honestly, I didn't think America had the spear as they did in pre-crisis. It seems that the spear is overpowered no matter its reality. Even the one we came from was the strongest Longinus. At least that is a weapon against the angels, which we have been cautious against. Though, they know we have it, so why the hell are they not coming after us? Because even with it, we are still nothing to them. We will avoid making enemies of them and the Spectre, but if need be, we will use the spear to defend ourselves. It is just a fancy stick until I can purge its curse and fuse it into my guardian spear. This reminds me that we should watch if Angstrom sends Invincible to Gotham. If he does that, I will have access to the Invincible universe. And if I can catch Angstrom, I should be able to harvest his ability to travel into other realities. So many legendary weapons and artifacts to claim, like the All-Black, the Destroyer, Gungnir. I think we found your dragon obsession. You want magical artifacts of legend. I wouldn't call it an obsession. I'm just always striving for more power. One can never be too powerful in these dangerous realities. Now, I will focus on the wars and my cloning experiments. If I can begin to create burning Martians, I will have a truly powerful species as my honor guard. Even just 100 of them would be a force of legend. I will have to be sure I'm stronger than then. While he was distracted, he felt Remonish grab his face and kiss his cheek. Now, you got my attention. Good. I think we can pick up where we left off. She yawned because she was still exhausted. She quickly fell asleep, making him chuckle before resting his chin on her head and letting himself fall asleep. He had nothing important to do right now. Chapter 24. An evolution of weapon, mind, soul, and body. After fighting Clarion and acquiring the Spear of Destiny, Justinian felt that some of his future troubles had been dealt with. He had no intention of causing trouble for the angels because it was just not worth it. However, the spear would be helpful against the forces of hell and even Trigon. Because of its anti-angel and demon properties, the spear could kill him if he ever had to fight it. Even Lucifer and Michael had to be careful because the spear had the power to kill the Spectre, who was the wrath of the Presence manifested. After acquiring it, Justinian spent most of his time using technology, magic, and psychic abilities to analyze the spear. He wanted to find out if it was still cursed because he did not want to go berserk by wielding it. 3 days later, he received updates that the tunnel expansions toward the 3 sealed city-states were nearly completed. If they pushed it to finish, they only needed a few more hours, and he could begin the attacks on them. However, before that, Justinian had an idea he knew could work. He took the spear into his laboratory along with Remnosh only. After all this time, he trusted her more than Diana, because Diana was loyal to the Amazons and the League. Remnosh was loyal to him, so he could trust her with things he didn't trust others with. He brought out the Spear of Destiny, but kept it in its glass case. He placed it on the floor as he observed it. What do you plan to do with it? Justinian glanced up at Remnosh, who was looking down at the spear. At their height, this spear looked small. Since I acquired the spear, I have used all my abilities to analyze it. I have learned a few things. First, the spear is indeed cursed, which is quite impressive because of how much divine energy is fused into it. I have reason to believe that the spear can slay most beings that it hits, including demons, angels, and gods. Remnosh walked around it, feeling nervous because of the spear's power. So this spear can kill anything? Justinian nodded. Yes. It also has the power to warp reality, as Hitler, a non-magical human, used it to prevent allied magicians from intervening in the war. He couldn't use the spear power better because he wasn't a mage. He only used a small part of the spear to prevent the mages of the Allies from intervening. Ultimately, he was still forced under his bunker in Berlin, where he had the spear. Rather than try to use it to fight back, he killed himself and cursed it. The curse causes the wielder to start losing control, pushing them to commit evil deeds. To be precise, he used the spear's power to fuse his soul and essence into it. Effectively, Hitler is fused in the spear. Remnosh frowned, as something didn't make sense. How did the essence of an ordinary man cause all that? Because, as you said this, Hitler wasn't a mage or anything, so how did he know that would work? I'm unsure because I only know a little about that time. I do have a working theory that he fused his essence with the holy energy in the spear to have a hold over the wielders. Drake, Albion, any working theories? You didn't read many pre-crisis comics, so I don't know. However, this reminds me of the true Longinus from our world, where God sealed a fragment of his will in the spear. So, it sounds like Hitler did the same to become the will inside the spear of destiny. So rather than God sticking the soul of a dragon, beast, or other creature, Hitler did it himself? That does make sense for a self-entitled little man-child like Hitler to do. Remnosh, from the look on her face, seemed surprised to hear voices from Justinian's armor. Do you have two-aided eye in there or something? Justinian shook his head with a smirk. No, my friends. About time you introduce yourselves, boys. True, greetings, my lady. I'm not an AI, but I am his partner in crime. My name is Drake, and I have been here this whole time. I didn't see much point in talking out loud. I am in the same boat. I am Albion, Justinian's and Drake's partner and friend. Please don't be jealous. We are not into men. Remnosh was more curious than anything. No, you two are good. What are you then? And why have you two never said anything other than not wanting to? I told you, I never saw a reason to do so. As for what we are dragons. Specifically, heavenly dragons, which means we have the potential to become dragon gods. As for how we came to be bound to Justinian, you shouldn't ask. Agreed. No, we are here to help. Justinian, I have an idea. If Hitler used the spear's power to curse it, why don't you use your anathema psyker fire to purge the spear of its taint? That or use the spear's reality-warping powers to purge Hitler's essence. Justinian hummed as he looked at the spear in the case. That seems reasonable. Remnosh, if you think I start to look like I'm falling to brainwashing, stab me through the chest with your blades. She instantly felt that was a terrible idea. The blades you forged to cut souls? That is a shitty idea. Maybe I punch you, or I can just kick you in the testicles. That should snap you out of it better. Remnosh could swear that besides Justinian, Drake, and Albion also judged her. With a frown, she flipped him off with both hands, causing Justinian to break into a deep laugh. He clutched his stomach as he bent over, still laughing. Ha 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 ha. You know, I realize why I love to be around you, Remnosh. You never fail to make me smile. She smiled as she sat down in a chair. I am pleased. Now, show me what this spear can do. Gladly. Justinian held his hand out to the glass case and opened it, causing the spear's aura to escape the sealed box. When it did leave, Justinian squinted his eyes. Most of it was exceptionally holy, but mixed in perfectly was a profound curse. As I said before, humans are creatures most capable of evil, even more so than demons, dragons, or gods. He walked toward the now open case and reached inside. On this side, the spear looked relatively small, but the moment he grabbed it, he instantly felt the overwhelming power of the spear flow into his body. He pulled it from the glass case and held it with both hands. He closed his eyes as he felt his body overflowing with vast holy energy. Just touching the spear made him feel like he was the center of the universe. Like anything he desired, he could achieve. That was all he felt at first, but the longer he held the spear, the more cursed thoughts tried to enter his mind. Not going to happen, Hitler. When Justinian opened his eyes, they were glowing a deeper shade of gold than ever. Golden purple psychic fire and lightning began to surge through the spear as he began to purge it of its curse. He drew on the spear's power to warp reality and used it to purge the curse from the spear. Remnash grabbed both of her nemesis' magic curved great swords on her waist. She pulled out the large blades and got ready. Justinian had reforged them with better materials and even fused some of his psychic might into them. Not yet. While she prepared to move, Justinian continued to purge the spear from Hitler's taint. After 57 years of being fused with it, Hitler's essence had been feeding off its energy. If he had been given a chance, the holy relic would have been reduced to a cursed spear, and the Führer would have become a demon. It was good that Justinian came around, because that would have been the tragedy. A massive misty darkness began to shape in front of Justinian with pure malice. No trace of humanity could be seen. Still, before the apparition could take proper shape, Remonish rushed forward using her natural strength and the enhancements of her psychic-bound power armor to move with incredible speeds. She slashed her swords through the dark shadow over 100 times in less than a second. With a roar of agony, resignation, and rage, the dark shadow began to lose its shape. Neen! Justinian grinned as he spoke a few words to Hitler before he was destroyed. Don't fight back. Those swords don't only cut souls. They poison them, too. Starting from the center of the dark mass, a small burning purple-gold flame appeared. Remnosh backed away as the essence of Hitler was burned and reduced to nothing. Is he gone? Justinian nodded. Yes, the spear is officially purged of all corrupting influences. With a sigh, Remnosh placed her swords back into their sheaths after powering them down. Good. So, are you going to warp reality now? Make it so Mars has always been under your control. Justinian glanced at the spear in his hand because he could do that easily, because unlike Hitler, who was not a mage, he was. He was also a psyker who were known to do that when they reached Alpha Plus and above. No, there are too many variables, and that is boring. Instead, I have an idea. Draig, Albion, sacred gears can evolve and absorb other artifacts, right? Yes, I would rather not think about it, but that kid, Issei, did absorb Ascalon, a dragon-slaying sword, into a dragon-sacred gear. What matters is that the version of the boosted gear still had seals, and the host was uselessly weak. This one has no seals, and you are strong enough. You could easily fuse your Guardian Spear with the Spear of Destiny. Agreed. You don't have to use the spear's ability to warp reality, but could be useful. Justinian opened his left hand and summoned his Guardian Spear from his soul. After all this time, it had been tempering in his golden Custodes dragon soul. Like his armor, the spear shimmered with an aura at times because Draig and Albion sometimes used their principles to enhance his gear. The reason was that as his gear grew, they grew stronger, so they were helping him, and he helped them. Remnosh crossed her arms as she looked at the two spears. Justinian's was a gigantic futuristic spear with a bolter attached to it. It was made of auramite, and it had been absorbing power as Justinian got stronger. As for the Spear of Destiny, it was made of much worse materials. In reality, the spear only looked as good as it did because it had evolved after absorbing the blood of Jesus. How are you going to do this? Justinian smiled as he already had the answer. Just watch. He placed his Guardian Spear on the large table before placing the Spear of Destiny on top of it. He then grabbed both at the same time before closing his eyes. He activated the latter's power and warped reality while drawing on the principles of domination and supremacy. He surged his mana and psychic energy and even drew the power of his soul. Massive amounts of power gathered around the two spears, but it was so much power that Remonish was forced to put her helmet back on to avoid being blinded. As for Justinian, he kept looking straight at the two spears as he used all his psychic and magical might to allow his guardian spear to absorb the Spear of Destiny. With a roar, his guardian spear absorbed all the materials and energy. For a few tense moments, everything was entirely before his guardian spear released a bright wave of golden-purple energy. Justinian covered his eyes as the glow was so intense that it was like standing in front of the brightest sun. The glow began to subside in a few moments, and when the glow was gone, he felt his eyes melt. Luckily, they were not, but when his vision cleared, he looked forward. Floating in the air was his guardian spear, who didn't look very different. However, from the tip of the spear blade to the handle, new golden-purple runes which he knew to be Enochian. His spear floated toward him, almost alive, waiting for him. With a grin, he reached out and grabbed his evolved spear. Instantly, overflowing power flowed into his soul through his link with the spear. He, Draig, and Albion reveled in the power as it flowed not just through Justinian's soul, but all three of them caused their power to surge to new heights. Both heavenly dragons felt like their principles got an upgrade, and through that upgrade, they took a step toward becoming dragon gods. As for Justinian, new Enochian runes appeared all over his black-purple armor, and his eyes began to glow as bright as the Emperor's. However, his pupils were now a deep dark purple, contrasting deeply in his eyes. Even Remnosh could feel it because she was psychically linked to Justinian, her mate. She fell to her knees as the power began to flow into her body and soul. The power entered her soul and burned away the mental and genetic limiters placed by the Guardians. Once those were gone, Remnosh grit his teeth as she felt liquid magma flowing through her body. Her eyes began to burn a deep blue. Just as the pain became unbearable, she felt the familiar and comforting feeling of Justinian's psychic presence. "It is all right. I am here for you. Thank you, it hurts. I know." She exhaled and relaxed as Justinian held her hand and sat beside her. He felt overwhelmed by the power flowing through his body and soul, and he had a dragon soul and a Custodes body. He even had help, but it was still way too much. Though this was a good chance, he sat, relaxed, and closed his eyes as he focused on drawing out all of the power of the Emperor of Mankind in his blood. Justinian, Remnosh, Draig, and Albion were all evolving. When it finished, they would be much stronger. Burning Martian Remnosh, Perpetual, Chapter 25, completed Ascension. There will be some fun time between Justinian and his mate, Remnosh. It is not needed for the story, but it is fun. Justinian held Remonish's hands tightly as he felt the overflowing power flow through them. Unlike when they used the original spear's powers, Justinian fused it with his guardian spear bound to his soul. As such, the overwhelming divine power of the Spear of Destiny surged through his body and soul like an ocean. It was so much energy that even his dragon soul and evolved Custodes body were tearing at the seams. Even Draig and Albion, who were helping him keep his soul steady, had their fair share of struggles. Justinian, I don't mean to be a downer, but we are drowning in divine energy here. We are absorbing part of it, but how much energy was in that spear? It is too much. I agree. Our principles are continuously growing in power, and we're doing our best to absorb to reduce the strain on you. But even for you and us, something will break. Probably us, rather than you, and I don't want to explode. I know, damn it. Let me focus on her first. She looks in pain. Like we aren't. Draig said that sarcasm as absorbing this much divine energy, which was even more pure than any god in their original verse, had pained them. But by enduring, their strength was rising as a payoff. Be more considerate. Suddenly evolving forcefully is bound to hurt. You're feeling it. Enough. Focus on gaining power from this. Sir, with a shaking arm, he pulled Remnosh closer as he could feel how much pain she was in. He could endure this pain somewhat, but once all the restrictions placed on her genetics and mind were burned away, her DNA began eating itself and the energy to enable the evolution. It started from her mind, since the energy entered through their psychic bond. This then flowed into her armor, weapons, and body, which, in a way, what she faced was more bearable than Justinian. He was facing the ocean of power with his soul, and even though was starting to struggle, using his psyker abilities, he began to surge more power into his Shadow Stalker armor and body. He closed his eyes and used his powers of biomancy to heal his body and allow the energy to fuse with him. While he did this, he kept some of his focus on Remnosh, who was probably the most important person to him. She mattered to him, and he didn't care what she was. Drake and Albion, he considered them his brothers, and they knew it. As such, the four of them endured the agonizing forced evolution together over 12 hours. For most, Justinian focused on himself as Drake and Albion could handle themselves. However, the three of them worked together overall, and with one wrong move, they would all die, since Justinian's body was the vessel for the three of their mighty souls. If their souls became too powerful, his body would begin to break down, but he fixed that issue by succeeding in evolving as he wanted. He became a perpetual, which would make killing him exceptionally hard. Drake and Albion even helped him enhance his Custodes heart to the next level and create a proper mix of Custodes and Dragon. This caused the heart to use not just mana, but psychic energy for him to use. As a result, his psyker level increased several times once the evolved Guardian Spear finished its energy wave. His Shadow Stalker armor, with which the boosted gear and Divine Dividing were fused, also reduced in evolution because of Drake and Albion. After turning himself into a perpetual, his body could handle its further enhancements without his efforts. Instead, he synchronized his efforts with Drake and Albion as the two dragons who took in as much power as possible by using their principles as sponges. Through the sheer amount of divine energy, they succeeded in causing those stolen principles to ascend. When that happened, the two heavenly dragons became the divine dragons, also known as dragon gods. Anyone else would have exploded from the surge of conceptual energy flowing through their body and soul. However, Justinian's body did not die, as he was effectively immortal. He would never age and could heal from almost any injury through his body's natural immortality. Any wound he couldn't heal, he could just force to heal through biomancy. The boon was that Perpetual could survive dismemberment, suffocation, decapitation, and even complete disintegration. With the ascensions of his brothers, Justinian gained access to two powerful concepts at all times, and that energy fused into his soul and tissues. The concept of domination and supremacy went perfectly with the powers the spear granted him. Reality and the forces of reality were his to do with as he pleased, meaning that as he was now, he could probably take on some of the heavy hitters of Earth. He wouldn't say he could defeat all beings in DC because he certainly could not. However, his unique abilities made him a threat that could not be ignored because, compared to most beings in DC, he kept growing stronger at an alarming rate. As for Remnosh, once he finished his evolution, he focused on her. He used his new conceptual powers to speed up the evolution and turn her into a proper burning Martian. However, he made a few edits to her DNA as he removed her ability to reproduce asexually by feeding on negative emotions. This way, she gained all the benefits of being the true Martian race with none of the downsides. He even helped her bind her power armor and Nemesis magic blades to her soul like he had. This way, the armor could shift its shape along with her. However, she reverted to her pre-March form when her evolution finished and fell unconscious. Justinian fell on his back with a massive bang. He took a deep breath before sending his entire armor into his soul. Even with his immortal perpetual body, he had so many energies in his body that things were changing. The Custodes dragon heart he had was beginning to draw conceptual energy to produce that rather than mana. His psychic energy was trying to become a stronger energy that didn't exist. His state of mind had ascended, and his thoughts were becoming more complicated than he understood. He was so overwhelmed that 1,000,000 times he preferred just to be naked right now. This is a bad time to say it, but I feel like absolute shit. I don't think I want to fight at all. And what the hell happened to your pets? What had happened to the Predicants? They got some energy, but unlike Remnosh, who was directly linked to me, their bond with me is on a lower level. They slept through their evolutions. Lucky bot hearts. I want to sleep. No one is stopping you. That is what I will do. For a month. Agreed. Justinian, keep your head down. We're going to be recovering. Me too, but I will stay awake. I got a planet to conquer. Drain and Albion didn't say much more as they passed out into sleep. By sleeping, they could stabilize their new concepts as their souls finished settling with their new powers. Justinian felt he needed that, so he picked himself up and, with some energy, conjured some underwear and shorts. Nothing more than that, but he wanted a bath more than anything. He glanced down at Remnosh and placed his hand on the chest plate of her armor. With some power, he sent it and her weapons into her soul. She would have a headache later, so he picked her up and looked around. This is a good chance to try some of these reality warping powers. With a thought, he used some conceptual and a stronger psychic energy to create a bounded field. It was more like he created a small pocket dimension because it was truly small. He just created a hot spring lake where he could relax. He nodded to himself because this was a very convenient power to use. Too bad reality warping can be dangerous. Oh well. He looked down at Remnosh, who was snoring away in his arms. Well, I am her mate, so I guess this is fine. As he stepped into the lake, he banished his new shorts and boxers before replacing them with a towel. He did the same for Remnosh, but removed her clothes because he had made those for her. He also wrapped her up in a towel as he sat in the lake with her beside him. Once both were chest deep in water, he took a deep breath of the warm water. Though he called it warm, it was boiling, but they wouldn't feel it if it was warm. This is my first real bath in almost a year. Have I been wearing my power armor that entire time? He reached up to touch his head with his left hand as his right held Remnosh above water. She sighed happily as she rested her head on his shoulder. Warm. I gotta stop thinking. Draig and Albion are asleep, meaning I am alone with my thoughts. He leaned forward and sunk further into the lake until he was chin deep. He closed his eyes while still making sure that Remnosh stayed above water. Even if she was 2 feet shorter than him, she was still 10 feet tall, which was pretty easy. As he closed his eyes and fell asleep, Remnosh next to him opened her new blue eyes. They were almost neon blue, but otherwise, she looked the same. At first, her vision was blurry, but it cleared up fairly quickly. She began to move her hands through the water, as this was a new experience for her. As a white Martian, she had never seen a lake before meeting Justinian, and this was a special lake. She could feel the water wasn't ordinary, and it invigorated her. She reached up and touched her head as it was hurting. It cleared up quickly, but when she looked to her left, she saw her mate asleep, chin deep in water. Justinian was snoozing so profoundly as he was genuinely exhausted. She couldn't even hear a thought or dream, as he couldn't dream. She wasn't focused on that as she looked down at herself. He stripped me naked. Other than the towel she was wearing, she was fully nude, but other than holding her by the waist to keep her above water, he hadn't done anything else. She frowned as she looked at Justinian. She leaned closer to his face, seeing that he was out cold. After being psychically linked to Justinian for months, she knew a few different human practices in bed. Compared to Martians, they were more fun because intercourse was never for pleasure. Skipped.